This is Scott Richmond.
And Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 1015 FM.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
And on this farm, he had a person. Okay. All right. Arnie Sherman, good morning to you.
Good morning, Scott. You know, it is actually officially feels like fall here in Montana.
Yeah.
The leaves are turning. You know, it's one of my favorite seasons of the year.
Yes.
And we have an interesting guest to fit in with, the fall. There are things that are like, you can plant things like beans and broccoli and beets and other things like that.
Right.
And we have Gavin Porter on today, who's going to talk about cross-slot feeders, I guess he works for, and talk about kind of the new technology of farming.
Yes.
And, of course, you and I growing up in New York and New Jersey know a lot about farming, right? I mean, we're the perfect hosts and questioners because I think our collective knowledge about farming lasts about 3 minutes.
It will be our wonderment.
It'll be our challenge,
right.
Challenge for the week. I remember an old joke about a city guy moving to a farm community like Stevensville, Montana, where I first lived when I moved to Montana 20 years ago. And he decided he was going to be a farmer.
Right.
I said, how hard could that be, right? I mean, I'm a city guy. I'm a smart guy. I worked on Wall Street. How hard could it be to be a farmer? So he goes into the local seed and feed, and he says, what's easy to farm? And the guy says, well, chickens are pretty easy. So he said, well, give me a couple of hundred chicks. So the guy gives him a couple of hundred tricks, and he says, let me explain. He said, you don't have to explain to me. I mean, how hard can it be? Give me the chicks. I'll take care of it.
Right.
A couple of weeks later, he comes back in. He says, I need 200 more chicks. And the seed and feed store guy says, you must be doing pretty well if you need a couple of hundred more. And he said, well, actually, I'm not doing very well. They all died. He said, they all died. He said, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I planted them too close together. That's kind of our orientation, to farming. And it's kind of sad because farming, as you know, has been around since time immemorial, right?
Right.
And I guess the agricultural revolution, if I can think back, if I can dust off the cobwebs, I can remember from school, I think the agricultural revolution started in the 1600s when they switched. You're going to be impressed with this.
Yeah.
Switched from open field farming to crop rotational farming, and not only crop rotational farming, but coming up with ways to replace what they used to do, which is plant half of a field and leave half of a field be dormant, and then switch and go back and forth. And during the agricultural revolution, they figured out a way to plant in different quadrants and sectors and use the land much more efficiently and effectively. And here's a trivia question, the one thing I do remember. Who is Jethro Tull? Now, I know what you're going to say.
I know Ian Anderson.
Thick as a brick, right? Ian Anderson.
Aqualung.
No, Jethro Tull was one of the pioneers of the industrial farming revolution.
Really?
And in fact, he invented the seed drill and the horse hoe in the 1700s, which really was a huge, major advancement in agricultural farming.
Why would they name a band after him?
Well, because they grew up in the same country, and probably in school they made him study Jethro Tull. And it sounded like a cool name, right?
Good name, right?
But
Jethro
most people
Tull.
think of Jethro Tull as Ian Anderson, playing the flute and singing "Thick as a brick" or whatever.
Right?
But no, he was one of the major figures of the agricultural revolution.
Beautiful.
And today we're gonna talk with Gavin Porter, who has applied technology now, which helps sustainable crop growing and the improvement of agricultural development, across the world.
Yeah. No, Gavin's a good guy. He comes to us via our dear friend Suzanne from the Culinary Arts School over here at University of Montana. You know Suzanne.
Yes.
We've had dinner parties that her team has catered.
Right.
And she's just a wonderful friend of the Town Square Media family. And so now we're welcoming Gavin Porter, her new husband. They just got married this past summer.
We'll have to say Mazel Tov.
We'll say Mazel Tov since we are in Rosh Hashanah. And we'll be right back with What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, presented by Glacier Sotheby's International Realty and Dawn Maddox. back after this. We are back with Gavin Porter on What Do You Know, presented by Dawn Maddox and Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. You can find her at dawnmaddox.glacier.com.
Gavin, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Very well, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity of coming in and visiting with you.
Right off the bat, I can tell from your accent you're not from Havre, Montana. So tell the audience, tell our listeners where you're from.
I'm from a little bit south of here, about 8,000 miles.
Can't get much further south, can you?
Not really. It's no. I'm a New Zealander who's been living up here in the States now for just over 7 years. Recently moved over from Washington State, where I was based for the 7 years.
Well, good. Well, then the most important question for the show, forget about agriculture. How are the All Blacks doing this season?
Well, they played Argentina on last Saturday, and they did pretty well. And one more game in South Africa next weekend. And then I think the Irish are coming over to Chicago to play at Soldier Field against the All Blacks on November the 5th. So,
fantastic.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have it? Are you streaming All Blacks?
Oh, yeah. You bet.
Where are you getting that from?
Well, ESPN3 have a fantastic
Is that right? They're running All Blacks?
Yeah,
My
you bet.
favorite uniforms on the planet are the All Blacks.
Oh, they're amazing.
It's really great.
What's the dance? What's the ritual tribal?
Well, they do the Maori.
The haka.
Right.
Yeah, the haka.
I love that.
The Maori war dance, yeah.
Some of the greatest videos of that. Anyway.
And you got some good guys in this part of the world. You know, your rugby teams, your Maggots.
I know.
The Maggots.
Maggots are good, but it's not
good.
like watching the All Black. I've really enjoyed it over the years.
But you moved from Pullman, Washington, here to Missoula. What brought you here?
Oh.
Let's give a plug for what brought you here.
Well, I love Montana.
And in particular, one special Montanan.
Yeah, and I.
She's not even from Montana.
I know, but she's here.
But anyway, yeah, I married one of your gals from around here, and so I moved over to make that all good. But yeah, and in the past, I've driven through here. I don't know how many times. Particularly getting over to North Dakota for trade shows and things like that.
Right.
And I just love it. I think the drive between Billings and Coeur d'Alene is just one of the best in the world. So
Beautiful.
yeah, it's a nice part of the world. And we've got guys, using our gear up in Kalispell, over in the northeast, around the Malta area, and down in the southeast, down in Ekalacta. So I've been, all over Montana. I love it. Yeah.
The reason for our listeners, I mentioned the All Black rugby team, is because Gavin's wearing his cross slot company shirt, but on the sleeve it has the All Blacks insignia, their logo on the sleeve of his shirt, which is hard
That's
to
right.
miss. So tell us about cross slot. What do you do?
Okay. Well, we're a technology that's involved in the agricultural industry, and we put seed in the ground without turning the soil over. So the way we do it is that we'll come along with a disc, or some guys will call it a coulter. We're going to put a slice in the ground, and then what we do is we have these side blades which lift a flap of soil both sides. We put the seed on one side, fertilizer on the other side, and then we have these packer wheels that come along and seal it all up. And we're all done.
So you put a slit in the ground in essence. Yep. And why is that preferential to the way things were done prior to the invention of your machinery?
Okay, so what we're trying to do is minimize what we call the above-ground disturbance. And there's a whole bunch of agronomic reasons why we want to do that. And we also get, for the farmer, economic benefits. And for those who are concerned about a bunch of environmental issues, we can also help in that area as well.
So you don't churn the soil.
No.
So in effect, not doing that keeps from killing microbes. What does that do?
Yep, that's one of the agronomic benefits that we're looking to achieve. Essentially, and I'll back up and give you a little bit of history how this came about, because it's quite interesting. And it goes back a few years. It goes back about 40 years ago when John Baker, who is the founder of the company, was doing his PhD, and he was trying to find what the optimal conditions were that a seed needs in order to get the best germination and emergence. Mm-hmm. And that took 6 years to figure that out. And when he figured that out,
no one had really focused on that before. That's pretty amazing, considering thousands of years of farming.
Indeed, and so he identifies what these conditions are, and then he looked around the world to try and find a manufacturer who built a piece of equipment that would create that environment. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't find anything.
Right.
So not only was he a soil scientist, but he also had a little bit of engineering background in him. And so he set to deliver this delivery system, which is essentially what we still use today. The basic principles are pretty much the same. And so what we end up with is, and we can draw some analogies from what Mother Nature does, and the best one to explain to people what we're doing is similar to when you open up an apple, cut an apple in half, what do you got in the middle of that apple? You got a hole in the middle there, right? And the seed right next door to it.
Right.
And so we're creating a similar environment where we create a pocket, and a seed needs three things to germinate. It needs oxygen, it needs warmth, and it needs water. And when those conditions are right, the microbiology takes over and breaks down the seed and so on. And we can come back to that later.
By the way, that's the same thing I need to germinate. As I was paying attention, I realized it's the same thing I need.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and there's not too many dissimilarities but what's going on there. But so that seed will sit on this horizontal shelf that we create. So it germinates with its contact with the moist soil, but you've also got humidity in there as well. Mm-hmm. And if you think about what happens, you leave your garlic or a bunch of onions sitting on the kitchen, and after a couple of weeks, all of a sudden you've got these green sprouts popping out.
Yes.
Well, it's the humidity that's helping accelerate that germination. And so we've created a pocket inside that seed zone that has humidity in there as well, and that helps accelerate the germination, and I'll get back to why that's important later on. So we have so by putting we put the fertilizer down at the same time, and we can put up to 500 pounds per acre next door to that seed. It's about an inch and a quarter away, so that we don't get seed burn with those new fresh young roots that come out.
Right.
And so when that seed starts to germinate and then starts to look for its nutrients, it doesn't have to go looking far for it. And so we get a much stronger, quicker germination and emergence occurring.
So you have greater density per acre as well of crop?
Yeah, we actually, using, for example, some of our Washington clients, they might be seeding, say, 120 pounds of seed per acre or 2 bushel per acre. Because they're getting a 93 to 98% germination, whereas other equipment might only give them 65 to 72%, we can cut back. So we've cut guys back from 120 down to, 85, 90 pounds.
And you're still getting more production from that less
canola, instead of seeding at 5 or 6 pounds an acre, we can cut that back down to 2.5 to 3. And that actually adds up quite a bit, because at $10 a pound, if you're saving them, $25 an acre, $30 an acre, over 1,000 acres, there's 25, 30 grand that goes into the farmer's back pocket.
So does your equipment cost more than what they used to be using, or use as an alternative?
Yeah. We're not the most expensive on the market these days, I'm pleased to say, but we aren't the cheapest either. But then again, compared to what we see and the reasons why I see a lot of farmers making the transition from a whole bunch of other manufacturers onto ours, is the longevity that we put into ours, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And of course the quality of the germination emergence, which then leads into a whole bunch of other things over time that will help improve the yields for them.
Do you find resistance among farmers to try the new technology?
Oh yeah, and this technology is no different to what happened 100 years ago when we were making the transition from horse-drawn tillage equipment and harvesting equipment to the mechanical side of it. It took 30 to 40 years for that transition to take place.
So what's their resistance? Is it cost? Is it not lack of familiarity with the equipment?
It's all of that. And we're not a big company, so we don't have a big marketing budget to get out there and show people how good this is. But we've made a lot of progress. We've had a lot of support from Washington State University. North Dakota State University has our research.
Well, that would make
equipment.
a lot of sense. That's agricultural universities giving the equivalent of the Good Housekeeping seal of approval to your technology.
Are there other companies that are doing using a similar technology?
No, we're the only technology in the world that places the seed and fertilizer, and we call it banding, on that horizontal plane.
Okay. And John Baker was the one who kind of created. He invented it.
Yeah, he discovered that was the environment that we needed.
Well, Gavin, you're the CEO of this company.
Well, of the USA operation.
Of the USA operation.
Actually, I should North American, yeah.
So how many countries are you in now?
Yeah.
We've got technology, if we include USA and Canada, 20 countries now.
That's impressive.
Wow.
So that's, obviously New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, and quite a lot of stuff happening up in Europe now, from Ukraine, Russia, Estonia, Lithuania, Poland, Austria, Germany, France, England, Ireland.
Did you crack the Chinese market?
We have been in there, and
I have any reason for asking.
They decided that they could make a better cross-lot.
Right.
Tried to copy the technology. There's a little bit of intellectual property involved in terms of using the equipment, and if you don't know how to use it, then as theirs has ended up, I think it's been under a tree for about 12, 15 years now. So, yeah.
But what's the size of the opportunity somewhere like China, like in terms of their reliance on farming? And
yeah, it's as you know, it's a big population. They farm. Well, let's put it in perspective. In North America and Canada is around about 450 million acres. China's around about probably 200 million. India's around about the same. And Europe without Russia is about the same as well. So we're looking at about 1.3 billion
of farmable acres.
Of farmable acres, yeah. We only have, in our total land area in the world.
You didn't count Africa.
Oh, you didn't count Africa.
No. But from an arable cropping point of view, only 4% of our land is actually available for arable cropping. And from that, we've got to, over the next, depends on who you listen to, next 30, 40 years, we've got to increase our food production, according to Agri-Dow Sciences, by at least 70% to meet growing demand.
So, and you're not going to get increased acreage, so you have to get more out of each acre.
Out of the acreage. So give us some numbers. What does that mean? It's 70%. How many people are we feeding currently?
Right. So if we look at USDA stats for America, the average farmer produces enough food for 155 people. And there's roughly 3 million farmers doing that. So that means that we can effectively feed, 450 million people in round numbers.
Okay.
So what concerns me is that, and again, using USDA stats, the average wheat production in North America is 45 bushel per acre. Mm-hmm. And that's been like that for a long time. Mm-hmm. Corn has been hovering around that 155, 157, and recently spiked up to about 170. So even if we doubled those levels of production, effectively, we're only going to get up to 1 billion people. Now, we're going to go from the current 7 billion to, say, 9 and actually to be even possibly 10 billion in the next 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And so we do need to start figuring out. So effectively, North American farmers could potentially feed 10, maybe 12, 15% of the global population. Yeah.
But then you have to go to India, China, Africa, and Europe has to squeeze out more per acre, and they have a limited amount of tillable acreage.
But the beauty of it is that, I've got farmers all over North America, and most of them have doubled their production. So
Possible.
Yeah, we've seen guys in North Dakota where their county averages 44, 45 bushel go up to 90. A guy up in Kalispell, he's just done 91 bushel winter wheat. He was a little bit disappointed because you got that frost in June,
right?
And he was hoping to get 100. So
that would be great.
So we know it can be done. We have guys in New Zealand who are doing 180, 200 bushel, and this is dry land, not irrigated. So it can be done.
In Canada, you said?
No, in New Zealand.
New Zealand.
England is doing, the 200 bushels on a regular basis now. So it's not unachievable.
So your equipment, your technology allows for the increased production, but it also has environmental benefits as well and sustainability advantages, right?
It does. And, let me just make sure people understand that all as I do is put the seed in the ground in the best possible conditions.
Right.
The results that these guys achieve are a function of applying a system. So it starts with when you harvest by leaving your residue on the ground, having good soil test regimes, good microbiology test regimes, a good seed guy, a good pest guy, fertilizer guy.
Right.
And when you combine all of those things in what we call the wagon wheel of successful seeding, that's when you start to get the results. And so, again, over in North Dakota, a really good plant nutritionist over there, they can rebalance all the way through. So you've got to apply a system approach in order to get these better improved yields.
It's not only a systems approach, it's a business approach. I mean, if you can double your production, you can double output. Your revenue, in comparison. And the question is whether the business model that allows for that resonates with the business owners, in this case, and the farmers.
You raise a really interesting debate because you can be a good farmer, and there are a lot of great farmers out there, but that doesn't mean to say you're a good business person.
Right.
And part of that is about having some basic business skills in terms of being able to analyze upfront capital costs versus long-term improvements in income and so on. And we need it right now. I would say 95, maybe 96% of farmers at the moment are not making any money. They didn't make any money last year when they were getting around $5 a bushel for their wheat. This morning futures were $3.96. And so their cost of production are anything from $4.80 to $5 a bushel. And so we've got a lot of guys out there who are underwater because
upside down.
Their cost of production are killing them. And so when you're making multiple passes across the ground, there's a whole bunch of, you're going to lose fuel, you're going to use more labor, you've got more wear and tear on your capital equipment. And then you're also, from an agronomic point of view, every time you run your tractor across a field, you lose a half an inch of moisture. You're also losing organic carbon. And all of these things are very, very important for what's going on in terms of improving our crops. And so we're trying to minimize the amount of above ground disturbance, because that also, if you start shaking the residue above the ground, then all you're doing is sending a message to your weed seeds, time to kick off. There comes competition for your moisture, for your organic carbon, for your fertilizers. And so that's what we call yield robbing.
Isn't it crazy to think about this?
It's interesting because, again, I think of it from a business perspective as opposed to a farming perspective.
Right.
So if I had 500 acres of tillable land, how much will this equipment cost me? And to implement the system you're talking about, what's the cost versus the fact I can double my revenue?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. But,
roughly.
You to do 500 acres, you don't need a big machine. You'd get away with a 15-foot, maybe 12-inch space, 15-opener unit, and you'd probably get into that for around about $160,000.
Right. So
now you could go out and buy another piece of equipment, even at half the price.
Right.
And again, I'm just off the top of my head, I haven't run the numbers, but I would suggest that the yield increase that you would need to justify your investment in a machine that's twice the price will be less than 5%. And I would suggest over time you'll actually do better than 5.
Sure. Let's do a quick ID. You are listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO. Our guest is CEO of CrossLot, Gavin Porter. We are presented by Dawn Maddox, Glacier Sotheby International Realty. You can find her online and her prestigious and beautiful properties online at dawnmaddox.glaciersir.com.
Scott, how about you and I going and buy a few thousand acres and getting in the farming business and use this equipment? We can double,
Some of our neighbors are already doing that.
I know, but I watched our neighbors, and they're not using this equipment.
They're definitely
using
not.
the old-fashioned way of doing things.
We live up on Butler Creek. And, the Hanson Ranch is across the street from us.
Right. Lovely ranch.
Beautiful ranch. And he's doing hay, though, right?
And cattle.
And cattle, right? Hay and cattle. And his cattle roam on our property for 3 months out of the year. And then IB is right over there.
Right.
IB, who's more commercial and residential landscaping.
So what's a perfect size farm for to implement? I mean, what's the ideal farm?
If you get
knowing what you know, if you were going to go into the farm, if you're going to the farming end of this business,
if you get east of the Missouri, you're getting into very small acreages. You're getting into sort of farm sizes, anything from 250 acres up to 600 acres. Through that Midwest area there, you've got anything from 1,500 up to 12,000 acres or even more. Where I've been over in the Palouse, most of the acreages are over there around anything from 1,500 up to 3,000.
There's a lot of big farms in the Palouse.
So
what's the Palouse?
It's that rolling hills area of Washington State.
Oh,
yeah. It's where we have slopes like this and they put wheat on them.
It's fantastic looking. It looks like a movie set of some, Wizard of Oz if they did it again.
Okay.
60-degree slopes. And, I've got 2 lots of farmers who literally seed into that and combine it. And, one of them is a very, very famous Pacific Northwest farmer, John Ashelman, and his son, Corey. And farmers, John does a lot of presentations and all around America, and guys will stand up and say, "You're crazy." And he says, "Not when you're getting yields of 120 plus bushel."
Wow.
And so what it proves is that we can actually farm the hills as well if you've got the right technology.
If you go to Walla Walla and you're heading west, and you can go right through the Palouse and use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That is fantastic country over there.
It's really great.
In fact, I say to people, you haven't got your CrossLot wings unless you've been in the cab with Corey or Mark Cochran
is that
or something
right?
like that. Yeah, it's scary stuff.
So tell us,
me.
how is CrossLot doing as a company? How have you done over the last couple of years?
North America has been pretty tight for us. Prior to that, when the grain prices were up, we did really well. It's been very quiet, but surprisingly, in the last 2 years, what saved our bacon has been the growth of our European business, particularly in the UK and also right across parts of Europe as well.
How big are the farms over there compared to North America?
A lot smaller. You've got, as I said, you've got the same acreage roughly, but you've got about 13 million farmers over there versus 3 million. So it gives you an idea as to the size.
Sure. Do farmers share your equipment? Do farmers come together and do that? Or do you lease equipment to farmers?
We do. We can lease equipment to farmers, and some do share. A lot of the European stuff is small stuff, 10, 12 feet, and a lot of that's driven by the fact that you can't have anything bigger driving down the road. Right. Whereas I go to North Dakota, my criteria over there is that it's got to be, when it's winged up, it's got to be under 18 feet to get under the power lines.
Right.
So it's 21 feet going down the road. And when you've got 20-ton of tractor and 20-ton of drill behind you, people get out of the road.
Yeah.
So what is the biggest business obstacle that you have to overcome right now? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you do?
I think it's just the lack of understanding how to crunch the numbers. And I've given presentations at direct seed conferences on how to crunch those numbers. By background, I'm an ex-investment banker, so I know a little bit about crunching numbers. And the basic tools that these guys need to make to make a proper commercial decision. I've got one farmer, and believe it or not, he comes from out of Wolf Point in the northeast of Montana.
Sure.
And he's the first guy who's ever come up to me and says, "Gavin, we've done an NPV calculation and you guys are miles ahead." Well,
You would say yes.
I fell over, and because nobody is that sophisticated in their number crunching, but that's ideally what you want to be able to do, because our gear is designed to last 10 to 20 years. And in fact, we've got some of our older gear, which is over 20 years old, still running in this part of the world, over in Washington. So when you start amortizing a piece of equipment over that time frame, the economics start to stand out.
Well, with the sale of this equipment also comes service contracts as well, that you guys do the servicing, or are there others third party that do that?
What we do is we provide a 2-year warranty, which includes training, and it's not, the transition is not easy. Where the big headline, if you like, it's a bit like talking about a big headline being transport. But under transport, we've got all these subheadings.
Right.
So we've got a motor vehicle, we've got a tractor, we've got an aeroplane. So we're asking somebody to step out of a motor vehicle effectively and fly an aeroplane. Well, you need a different set of skills.
Sure.
And so if you've been out there, running discs and harrows and cultivators, etc., and then other seeding equipment, then making the transition across is a little bit scary for a lot of guys.
Right.
And so we spend a lot of time because, it's like the old story, the generals in the army would say, an hour reconnaissance up front saves you 10 hours on the battlefield. Well, getting these guys trained up front and comfortable, and usually it takes maybe a day or maybe a couple of days in the tractor riding around with them, getting them up to speed. And after that, they're fine.
I would assume that the younger farmers are more amenable to this.
Yeah, our demographics are quite interesting. It's the below 30s, the younger guys coming out of college want to do something different. But the other side of the equation is usually the plus 50s. And so the guys that have been successful farmers and now want to...
Have stuck to it for their career.
Yeah, and now want to make an improvement or leave the land in better shape than when they got it. And so, it's the guys in between who want to bounce around on the tractors and burn up the fuel and what have you.
At Washington State or Montana State or North Dakota, are they teaching this in classes about?
There is not one, I'm not aware of it. There's not one tertiary institution that teaches no-till farming in North America.
Really?
I'm talking to one institution in Illinois, and hopefully they will take the opportunity to grab that position because there's
why not?
There's a number of reasons.
Too set in their ways, or
there's a bit of that. There's a bit of preciousness. There's a lot of guys who want to reinvent the wheel. Our whole business has been scientifically based, and it's the technology is summarized
us a book right now, ladies
in this
and gentlemen,
book, which was commissioned by the FAO, the World Organization. And that basically is, 3 or 4 feet high of research material that's gone into it from Washington State, Don Rykowski over in Illinois, and a bunch of other renowned no-till scientists from around the world as well have contributed to it. And so, I see, for example, it's, the big buzz in the last 3 to 5 years has been cover crops. Well, we've been using cover crops with our technology for 30 years now. And so all of a sudden...
What are cover crops?
Essentially, when you've finished harvesting a crop, if you leave the ground bare, Mother Nature will put something there.
Right.
So you're better off actually controlling that because generally it's a plant that you don't want, i.e. a weed.
Yeah, weed.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you start to put cover crops in... there are all sorts of things that happen from that point of view. You can keep moisture in the ground, or if you've got too much moisture, you can use a different type of crop to suck it out. You can use it to improve your soil structure. And so all of a sudden every university has to now go out and do its own independent research on cover crops. Well, we're way down the line on that.
I mean, I can understand, for example, why a university might not want a cross slot person coming because I think they're marketing, it's selling your own equipment. But somebody who would go around and guest lecture on no tillage, approach to farming,
Right.
you would think they would be interested in having someone have that conversation.
Yeah, and you've got the Wisconsin-based company, Lessiter Publications. They are very, very strong in the no-till area, and so they run annual conferences, a lot of good publications, but mainly driven for what's going on in the Midwest with the corn and the other row crops, the soybeans and so on. So there's a lot of room for getting people up to speed on this technology.
What other? Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, so among the crops that are out there, does this work better with one particular crop as opposed to others?
No.
So corn, wheat, whatever, soybean, it'll have the same kind of multiplier effect if you follow the no-tillage seeding along with the system's approach to it.
Yeah. So what I've got here is for the audience is some seeds that we put in the ground. So the small seeds, camelina, about the size of a pinhead, spring wheat, probably 20 times bigger.
What we have here, we have a piece of paper with 3 different seeds on it. One is called the camelina seed.
Very tiny.
Very tiny. The next largest is spring wheat. And then the final, garbanzo.
Huge. It's a huge bean.
Trumpian.
It's a Trumpian-sized bean.
So
Spring wheat is probably a Tim Kaine size.
Yeah. I'm going for the garbanzo bean myself.
Politics always enters this.
the chickpeas. I'll tell you a story about chickpeas. That's what our hummus is made out of.
Right.
Yes.
And it is one of the fastest growing food sources in North America. It's something like 30% compound a year at the moment.
Is that right?
Growth. Yeah, it's
what
fantastic.
are some of the most popular foods and crops that are happening right now in the United States and then overseas?
In the States, corn is still the largest, wheat is second, and then soybeans are the next. But globally, wheat is the biggest crop that's grown.
Right.
And one of the reasons for that is that accounts for 75% of our protein intake globally. So yeah, it comes from cereal grains.
So does not only does it increase the amount per acre, but does it increase the protein content of wheat?
It can do, yeah.
That's a good question.
It's well, sometimes you don't want high protein because if you're producing say for a soft spring wheat or something like that,
right,
then you don't want it. Whereas if you're producing a hard red wheat for high quality breads and
pastas and
flours,
things like that.
Well, pasta's a different grain as well. That's a Durham wheat. That's a specialty wheat.
But they need high protein content.
Yeah, you want high protein.
Over 12%.
Yeah.
Aren't you impressed that I even knew
How do you
that?
know that, Arnie?
That's a long story.
I spent a lot of time in Italy.
Been spending time in Italy, yes.
Yeah.
I had people come here to look at buying wheat, and they needed at least 12%. If they have less than 12%, they get fined or taxed, extra taxed in Italy.
Is
that right?
Yes,
Yeah,
they get docked.
It's called dockage, and we're seeing a lot of that at the moment, particularly in Washington. I was over there last week. And there's a test called a falling number test, and it's how long something takes to go through a mushed up cereal of
Question for
wheat.
you. Let's move from wheat to weed.
Yeah.
Are there any of your clients that are harvesting, especially in Washington, marijuana, cannabis?
Not yet.
But growth area.
We Oregon, there's a few guys down there who are looking to use it. We do a lot of industrial hemp down in New Zealand, and we've got 2 or 3 farmers down there who are experts in growing it. And the big issue with it is it's a very, very fibrous plant. And again, if you haven't got the right tools, then all you end up with a hell of a mess. When you try and see through those residues, because it's very stringy, and so you need a good. Yeah.
Where is your equipment manufactured?
So we make our openers at the moment. We outsource everything. So we build the openers down in New Zealand.
Right.
We assemble them there. Sometimes we'll build the frames down there and ship them up here. But I have guys in Idaho, Lewiston, Idaho, who build frames for us. I have guys in North Dakota who build frames for us.
Okay.
And we have guys up in Canada. And eventually, as we get the numbers up, then we'll look at bringing some of the opener manufacturer up here as well. We at the moment, you're comparing shop rates down in New Zealand at around about US equivalent $30 an hour. I pay anything from for welding $65 to $125 an hour. Assembly, I'll pay $55-$65 an hour for up here. So until we can get economies of scale, then we'll keep doing it, because what we can do is stick 90 of these things into a container,
right,
and get them up here very, very cheaply. But
Scott, don't let any of the other people who work at the radio station hear those. They'll be out there going to welding school. You won't be able to hire anybody
I'm
here.
ready. I got my hat on.
So you lived here for the last 7 years in the northwest part of the United States.
Yeah.
How does that compare to your, living in New Zealand? What are the contrasts, and what are the similarities, and what's your assessment?
Well, there's I'm an outdoors guy. I like my fishing. I like tramping and so on. And this part of the world has all of that. The only difference is, as I say to people, is that when I'm in New Zealand, I don't have to go 50 mile to get there. Over here, I've got to go 500 mile. And that's the only difference. The fishing up here is fantastic. The hunting's great. The
skiing,
hiking.
ski?
Yeah, the skiing, all of that. So, but it's just the distance between, and that's all.
And how has the move from Pullman to Missoula impacted you in any way?
Well,
making your life better.
I'd prefer it that it was a bit warmer.
You've already passed the warm season.
Did you bring a bunch of wine with you? We don't have any vineyards
you'll be
here.
surprised. October's a pretty nice month in Montana.
Well,
the weather too. It doesn't get as cold as
I know it's temperate here.
It's fairly temperate in October.
I see some snow up on those hills up there already today.
Don't go up there.
Engineer that.
Don't go up there.
Yeah, really. All right. Well, our guest is Gavin Porter, CEO of Cross Slot. You're listening to What Do You Know, presented by Don Maddox, Glacier Sotheby International Realty. We'll be back right after this with our final segment. Okay, we're back with Gavin Porter, CEO of Cross Slot, and you're listening to What Do You Know, presented by Don Maddox, Glacier Sotheby International Realty.
Gavin, I assume there's a difference between the percentage of income that people in North America, United States, spend on food and in other countries. And what is the range on that?
Well, it is. And what blew me away was that it's for North America or for the USA, it's less than 6.6%.
That's not much
of our income is spent on,
when you think about
food. All the way through to some of the poorer countries like Pakistan and Russia at 47.7 and 31.6.
So in Russia, half of people's income is being spent on food, and here it's 6%.
But I think also you've got to be looking at what their income bases are in terms of GDP to see how that's being spent and so on. But,
I'm not sure about those numbers. I know Scott and I spend a lot more than 6% of what we earn on food. We have it flown in from all over the United States.
USDA stamps.
We've skewed those numbers. You don't know how much it costs to send a pastrami from New York out here for us to graze on. So tell me also a little bit about the microbiology and the microchemistry of all this.
Yeah, farmers have been really, really good at what I call at-the-ground management and above-the-ground management. Mm-hmm. And it's only really in the last 5 to 7 years that we've been paying attention to what's going on below the ground and the importance of soil health and soil structure, and how some of our farming practices have been damaging that environment. And we're lucky in this part of the world. Over in Washington, we've got some really good soil microbiologists. We've got another one from around this part of the world. Jill Clapperton is probably, if not the number one, she'll be number 2 in the world, soil microbiologist in this part of the world as well. And we're now starting to understand the importance or more about what's going on. So, for example, we take a teaspoon of healthy soil. There's 6.5 billion microbes in that teaspoon.
Really?
And
wow.
Soils are just like we are. We've got good bacteria, we've got bad bacteria. And the rules are make sure the good ones outweigh the bad ones.
Sure.
And so we're now getting a better understanding of the components of that microbiology, the role of earthworms in dealing with residues, the way that the worms will help improve our drainage. They bring in the residue into the soil. They partially digest it. That becomes food for the microorganisms. The microorganisms are the guys that bring the nutrients across to the root system.
Right.
And when those things are in or out of balance, then the root system will send out chemical signals saying we need certain microbes to fix this problem or bring us these nutrients and so on. And so there's this whole community going on down there, which we're only just starting to get a handle on.
And I assume also that climate change has an effect on all of this. You've hit
the nerve here.
No, I'm just saying in terms of trying to make the balances work as things are changing in a particular area.
We've always had climate change. The question is the impact that it has. And look, sadly, our whole business is based on science.
Right.
And some of the nonsense that we see from a lot of people who should know better is not science. When somebody's telling me that I'm running a computer model that tells me that I'm going to be flooding you in 100 years' time because of climate change,
right.
And saying, we believe, we think, maybe, before I got here, I heard, what's his handle, DiCaprio saying, in my humble opinion, that ain't science.
Right.
And if we look at just logic tells me that, what is the atmosphere?
Sure.
We know
right.
it's 78% nitrogen, 18% oxygen, 1% hydrogen, 0.9 neon, da-da-da-da-da. Where's the room to get the rest of the carbon in there? So that's one part of it that we've got to start working out. And then, the abuse that we get in terms of what is a greenhouse gas.
Right.
Well, see those little wee white fluffy things up there? They're called clouds.
Right.
And they're a greenhouse
the
gas. They are 95% of the greenhouse gases. So all these other greenhouse gases that we talk about, which, when I first was looking at it, I thought, oh, God, methane, CO2, nitrous oxide, sulfites, etc. There's not a lot of room up there. Now, if we take away all that 95% of greenhouse gas, it's doing a job. And its job is to actually, when the sun hits Earth, those rays bounce off.
Right.
And they take off again. If we didn't have cloud cover up there, we would be minus 15 degrees Celsius as opposed to an average of 15 degrees Celsius.
Right.
And I don't think too many people would be very, very happy if we got rid of that.
Sure. But I do want to add, if the Earth is warming in general, if we had the warmest year we ever had, does that really affect you or does it not affect you?
No, because, everybody says, farming's going to change. Yeah, and we're already seeing that now. We're seeing crops being corn crops being grown up in places like Canada and Ontario and southern parts of Canada. We've got different varieties now. And you've got to remember there's a difference between a corn crop is a heat-driven crop, so it needs so many heat units to mature, whereas a wheat is a light-driven crop, and so it needs daylight hours. And so that's why we have this north-south split in terms of where we do grow. So, the farmers say, we'll grow more corn because we can get better yields, better prices for it, and so on. So they're not concerned too much about it. The other issue is that what do we do? What is the crop that we grow? What do? We take water.
Right.
We take CO2. We take light. We give it a kick in the pants with some nutrients, and we produce sugars, carbohydrates, proteins, and oils.
Right.
That's what we do. So if we keep sequestering carbon, we're not going to have enough of it to grow our crops. It takes a ton of carbon to grow a ton of tree. Simple fact. And I think that we've been led up the path. And the only reason why I get pretty anti about it is because I'm a bit like Donald Trump. I don't like paying too many taxes. And we're paying high fuel prices. We're paying high electricity prices. We're paying higher food prices because of transport. Right. Because somebody hasn't done their homework. And so what I'm saying to people is, okay, well, let's just put this into perspective. What can we control? Man-made carbon emissions depends on who you read. Anything from 35 to 50 gigatons a year, maybe more. Natural biodegradation from plants and fauna, etc., about the same.
Sure.
Volcanoes, Mount St. Helens, Mount Etna, Mount Tongariro, all spewing stuff into the atmosphere, somewhere between 150 and 200 gigatons. And that's not even on the Richter scale compared to what gets absorbed and released by our oceans.
Sure.
So if somebody's telling me that we can control the greenhouse gases, etc., and control the world's temperature by 2 degrees Celsius, which is what they're telling us,
right?
I'm a little bit...
You're skeptical of that.
Prove it to me.
But he's using science to poke holes in it versus just an opinion.
Yeah, sure, which we respect much more.
We have to wrap up, unfortunately. Last question, Arnie?
Last question is your business growing? Are you happy with it? And what are you going to be doing here over the next few years?
Well, we'd like it to grow a lot more, obviously. And one of the things I'm doing is we're doing a little bit of a capital raise at the moment so we can take on more people, expand our North American operations and our European operations as well.
Any plan to go to Africa?
Not at this point. We do have a technology available for that part of the market, but we're better off getting our foundations in place first, and then we can go into some of these, lower cost markets and deal with that.
You seem to have a great deal of enthusiasm for this, and want to continue doing it, which we admire here on the show.
I've spent a lot of time in banking, investment banking, and then got into the real world. And, if we strip away all the crap that we see out there, the wealth we create in this world either comes from below the ground, at the ground, and slightly above the ground. And so when I hold up this iPhone, and that's got a $300 billion market cap, I'm thinking something's wrong with this world. When we've lost our way in terms of... We
used to say that Bill Gates, who's the first or second richest man in the world, can carry everything that made him money in his pocket through a metal detector and not be traced.
Exactly.
As opposed to the captains of industry and over the centuries.
Well, without our farmers, we're lost.
Sure.
And,
absolutely.
I saw a fantastic car sticker the other day, and it just said, no milk, no ice cream.
Well, with that, Gavin, thank you very much for joining us on What Do You Know?
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And if you want more information on Gavin and CrossSlot, you could go to www.crosslot.com. You've been listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, presented by Don Maddox, Glacier Sotheby's International Realty. One quick announcement. Tonight, the 9th, we're going to be doing the third of our presidential debates at Imagination Brewing over on Broadway, so please join me there. And Arnie may show up as well, which it's a Sunday, and I think, we may
Depends on what food truck's there.
But anyway, we'll be at Imagination Brewing tonight. And Arnie, I'll see you next Sunday.
See you next Sunday, Scott.
Okay, thanks, Gavin.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290, 101.5 FM, and newstalkkgvo.com.